Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Daryl Urbanski, your host as always. And today we are joined by Monette Quiogue, a marketing powerhouse with over 29 years of experience. As a co-founder and managing partner at Ambidexter and Bookshelf PH, Monette specializes in content marketing and strategy, particularly for tech companies. Her expertise in client relationship building, innovative campaign design, and operational efficiency has driven significant growth for numerous high-profile brands. Monette's dedication to transforming client engagements into long-term partnerships sets her apart. I've asked her to join us here today to share her story and insights into strategic content marketing and innovation. So Monette, thank you so much for joining us. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Thank you so much for having me, Daryl.
It's an honor and a pleasure to have you here. And I always like to start off by asking, before we get into a lot of the what you do and how you do and all that, how did you even get started? Were your parents marketers? Were your parents entrepreneurs? Are you just carrying the torch forward for another generation?
My dad has been one of, or is, or was one of the, I guess I would still say, most respected marketers in the Philippines. His name is Monette Quiogue. He was more known in the industry as MPQ. He has worked all sides: client, ad agency, media company, broadcast. So I guess I followed in his footsteps. Although, as I always say, I followed him, but I took a left turn because he had always been in like client management, account servicing, and managing the companies. But I went through the creative side. So I said I want to follow in his footsteps, but not right behind him, more like beside him. So same industry, but different specialties.
Got it. Okay.
So that,
And you started, sorry, how old were you when you were helping out with this? Or sorry.
no, I actually started in the industry a little, quote unquote, a little late because after college, I was working student in the US, and my jobs were mostly more in admin positions. And then I had the opportunity my dream originally was to work in film. That was my dream. But I knew it was going to be a little more difficult doing it in the US. And I had the opportunity to work in the Philippines. My dad was with ABS-CBN, and at the time, and he helped introduce me to the powers that be. And they had, coincidentally, were looking for people for Star Cinema, their film arm. So I came home, I packed my bags and came home and did that. And I was actually one of the, considering I started at the entry level, which is production junior, not just production assistant, but junior production assistant. And on one of my first week there, one of the PAs at the time was the younger sister of one of my classmates. So she knew how old I was. So I was already 27 at the time, and most of the PAs were fresh graduates.
Right.
So she actually asked me, "So how does it feel to be the oldest PA?" And I was like, "Oh, okay." So I said I knew that I had gotten a late start. My contemporaries, the people I met, had already been like, maybe I would say like second or third level. They were already assistant directors or script continuity writers. So I knew I was starting a little late. So I worked in film for about 3 years. I think that was. I made 8 films, and then after that I left. I got it out of my system, I guess you would say. I mean, I was very lucky that my first film was not just a box office hit, but also critically acclaimed. So I think and I worked with one of my idols at the time, Sharon Cuneta. And so it was, and the director, Olive Lamasan. So it was really like baptism by fire because it was a difficult project, but at the same time also fulfilled all of your creative dreams. And being a film buff, this was like my dream. But then after 3 or 4 years, you also realize that I got the dream out of my system, and it's a difficult job. It's a difficult industry to be in, physically, emotionally, financially. So I admire everyone who has stuck it out. I admire people who, it's nice to see, like the people who I started with are now successful directors, producers. So it's nice to see that and do that. I knew them when. But so I got that out of my system. And then, so the next step was I wanted to stay within a creative industry, but not film. So the next logical step, at least for me, was to go into advertising. I had also dabbled in writing I was writing. I had always been writing in my, like in college, in high school. I was always the one writing the plays and writing scripts and things like that. So I said, maybe this is something I can use. So I went into advertising and started working as a copywriter for campaigns and
Mm,
Gray, which is now known as Gray Philippines. So that's how I got started. And then from there, it just progressed. So I stayed in the industry as a writer, and then I became a creative director. And then I left to start my own. One of my former colleagues and I started our own boutique firm. And then after a few years of that, I had the opportunity to join Ambidexter.
got
And
it. What led you to content marketing? Because advertising is very direct.
yes, I was in advertising. I specialized in what they used to call below the line, which is, or I guess now it's called non-traditional. So we did the things that were in tri-media. So we did everything that wasn't print, TV, or radio. So things like
Oh,
brochures and flyers and websites and things like that. Because I had always found my I won't say niche, but my strengths lay in long form. As I used to tell people, I think in paragraphs, not punchy phrases.
right.
So I guess that's how the natural progression was into content marketing, because it's writing and it's marketing, but it's in long form more. Yes, there is social media, but social media is still
Right.
a derivative of that. So that's where I felt it was natural to lead into that.
And what would you recommend to someone starting out or struggling with content marketing now? Having been in the industry for so long, having seen and come from these
Don't keep
other,
saying that, Daryl. You're aging me by saying so long.
but there's
um,
value in that. It makes you
um,
valuable.
Yeah, for me, I think especially now that there are so many resources available, unlike when I was starting out as a writer, I still remember when I was working that there was no Google and there was no internet, having to learn everything ourselves manually through books. But I think right now, if that's really an industry that you want to be in, then study
Study.
first study find a niche that you want to start in. Do you want to do lifestyle? Do you want to do tech? Do you want things like that? What industry do you want to write about? And then study not just the other websites and other resources that do content marketing, but just study the industry, because there are different tones on writing for both. If you're doing lifestyle versus tech, there's a certain tonality that is required. So study that and know your skills. And
Mm.
that's how you start. But eventually, as you get into it more and you start working more, then you'll also learn how to shift and transition from one style to another. So then you can start working towards having more clients and opening yourself up to other industries and other fields.
Yeah, I think that's a good tip. I think it's also important to study the history of the, I
Yeah.
think that's what you mean by studying the industry, to understand where it's at now and where it's come from so you can better see where it's going. And also, they say history doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes. And there's value, I think, in knowing and being like, oh, this is happening again. And it's like that. It's different. It's its own
Yeah.
thing, but it's like that. And that's a huge advantage to a certain extent, I think, for some people when they get that. There's that sort of like that tactile feeling for something.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
I love that.
And it's a lot, especially now, it is a lot easier now. Like um, I work with a staff of much younger people. So I would tell them back in my day, we
Yeah.
would have those little chats, and I would be like, that when we had to write papers, you actually had to borrow a whole bunch of books from the library,
That's
and
right.
every home had at least one kind of encyclopedia, and you would do that. And I would go to I would always like when I was in college, borrow a whole bunch of books
Yep.
and leave them at home until I would get the paperback, because I wanted to make sure that I had access to this information in case the teacher says, "Oh, you did
Yep.
this wrong and your footnote here was wrong." So I would always have. Thankfully, our school had a limit on overdue fees, because I would sometimes keep the books for a month
Come on,
after,
yeah.
and then at the end of the semester, walk in there with like 10, 20 books. Like, I'm returning these, and if there wasn't that $5 limit on the overdue fees, I probably would have
Paid a lot.
been in
Yeah,
debt.
people don't
Just
realize
paid out.
when you had a question and you didn't know the answer and the people physically near you didn't know the answer, the only way to get the answer was to go to a library
Yes.
and then go figure out which part of the library had the books of that topic. And then you had to walk down the aisle looking at the covers and the titles of the books. And then you would grab an armful of books that you think may have the answer to your question in it and take them to a table where you would begin to sort through them to figure out, like, what is the diamond here out of the diamond in the rough. Now you don't even have to get out of bed. You could be on the toilet. You just have to wiggle your thumbs a little bit,
Yeah,
and you have the world's
exactly.
information at your fingertips. People don't get, there's value in that, but then there's also a lack of appreciation of the power. Like, a lot of people don't realize that keyword research is such a common term. Keyword research. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Keywords are literally people putting their thoughts into Google. Like, before, you would have to pay people to stand on the sidewalk with clipboards and survey people. And again, it was paper and pen, and you'd be there for days or weeks to get enough. And then you have to take it back and tally it. Now I could just go look at some keyword research and I can know what people are thinking when they're at home in the privacy of their own home and they think no one is watching, and they type these things in. And that is so powerful. You can go to forums, you can go to Reddit, you can go to Facebook groups, and you can search for keywords like frustrated, crying, overwhelmed, and see what people are talking about when it comes to their pain points and the issue. This is multi-million-dollar research in another life.
Yes. Yes. And it was even funny. Like, we had gotten to the point where you knew which brand of encyclopedia had more information.
Yeah.
I always felt bad because the most popular encyclopedia was Encyclopedia Britannica, but we didn't have that at home.
Yeah.
So I was like, does that make us less than because we didn't have Britannica? But then I think our encyclopedia, I think it was called Merritt and Collier. So I was the only one who had those. So my information was a little different from everybody else that had Britannica. So then I realized, oh, this is actually an advantage to not have the same.
Right.
And I guess taking that into what you're talking about is, there is value, and not value, but there is, of course, using keywords in your research and how easy it is now. But also, there is still some skill involved in how to search, and how to do research. A friend of mine used to always joke about every time she would have to Google something, even the like the silliest things. Like, I want to Google boots, but I want boots that are like ankle height and brown. She would be like, I can't find them. Just search this for me. And I would give her a whole bunch of links for everything she searched. She's like, how do you do that?
Right.
I said, I don't know.
Right.
I would think I'm entering the same things, but then there's also, I would change up words, or I would change up how you say it, and I said, I don't just go to the first page of the Google search. You have to go through the rest of the pages, because you never know what's hidden. So she would always be like, I would be her Googlist.
Her Googlist. It's even like, now we have AI, but there's actually a job title that's a prompt engineer. And really what it means is asking the right questions.
Yeah.
It's about knowing how to ask the right questions and knowing how to massage things and how to communicate. And that has always been, they say the quality of your life is the result of the quality of the questions you ask yourself and those around you, to a large, big extent. And I think that, I think it's related. So what are so let's get back into the content marketing now.
Yeah.
What are some of the most important skills and maybe even behaviors that you think content marketers need to survive in today's day and age?
I think apart from just having an open, it might seem silly or unimportant, but having an open mind, and having a mind that is willing to learn and not be so rigid in your beliefs, because you're going to have to deal with, first, from the client servicing side of it, you're going to have to deal with a lot of different personalities. So you have to be open to that, and being open and being flexible. So you have to know how to deal with one person and deal with another person, deal with their requirements. You have to also learn how to be, like you said, knowing the right questions to ask. Because sometimes when you're talking to someone or talking to a client, they feed you very little information, but you need, they just are, not because they're not familiar. They don't know. They can be very technical. You could be talking to someone who's an engineer or who's in IT, who knows how to code,
Right.
who knows the coding and who knows the back end stuff, but may not know how to talk about the story. So you have to know how to ask the right question.
Mm,
Um,
that's really
and
true.
yeah, and like you said, it's still very important now. It was important to know how to search in encyclopedias then, and it's important to know how to search, ask the right questions on Google, and ask the right questions when you're talking to somebody. And I think those are very important. And again, the flexibility, because you're in content marketing, you're not just dealing with one kind of client. Although at Ambidexter, we did start working with tech clients. But even if you're talking to tech or clients in the tech field, there's fintech, there's edutech, there's agritech, and there's still a lot of little subcategories. So if you want, you can specialize in one particular thing, one particular industry, one particular vertical. It's still important to be able to talk to different ones and talk to and work with different ones. So I think that's important. I think one other thing is just read a lot. And I always say, I guess on the other side, since we got into the book publishing apart from the content marketing, is I always believe when I say read a lot, it doesn't have, you don't have to read the, like my friends would always ask me that you had all these lists on Facebook, like your 25 books, top 25 books, you know, I would never answer them because I would always be, but my books are silly. I read romance mystery novels. You see a person with a list with all these
Right.
literary works at Jane Austen and whatever, and I'd be like, loves, lost, whatever. So I was like,
Yeah.
I'm not publishing my list. But then there is value in what in reading whatever you want to read. Because
Yeah.
I learned about different before I started traveling, I learned about different countries from books. From a
Hmm.
romance novel, they fell in love in Seattle. It was everything was set in Seattle. So Seattle was on my bucket list of places to visit because I wanted to see Pike Place Market. I wanted so things like that. So there is so read, especially now that it's so easy. So read about the industries, yes, and teach yourself, but also just read books because it will help you learn how to express yourself,
Yeah.
learn how words should flow.
Yep. Yeah. Some people might overlook this, but there's actual real value. I've talked to high level, like very successful sales copywriters, and they say you should dedicate a percentage of your reading time to reading fiction because we are storytellers. You have to understand what makes a good story.
Yeah,
You have to understand how to present and develop characters, right? Content marketing is not a one-time event. It is an ongoing flow. And so what you're saying, some people might brush it off like, what? I got to read romance novels to get good at content marketing. Yes, you do. You need to read some. There's even one guy, Charles Burwosky. He was one of the most highly successful authors before, but his stuff is a little risque. Like he tells a story,
mhm.
but there's always little bouts that like sexual teasing here. It's not, I don't know. I don't know if it's an erotic novel or not. I read a couple of them. I'm trying to remember, but they are. It's like, and then you're like tickled here, and you're like, oh my goodness. I
Yeah,
mean, but it's not full on. But you have to read some of these people because what it is, they understand how to capture and hold attention, how to
exactly.
tell a story. That's what I got from reading his stuff. I was like, oh, every time he gets to a certain point, it's like he tries to pull you in again by appealing to like your excitement nerves type thing, and then
Yeah,
you're hooked again, and then you're turning the page, and then he gets back into the story, and it's and that's an important thing. It's all part of, I think, learning human psychology, which is really
yeah,
valuable. So, yeah.
yeah. And it also helps you a lot with word choices. Like in the same way that different romance novel writers will describe that meet cute in a different way, but at the end of the day, it's used to wanting to know, like you said, wanting to know more about this story. But describing instead of just saying he's tall, dark, and handsome,
Yeah.
finding different ways towered over me and things like that. So it's word choices. It's word choices for describing the same thing, especially if you're in content marketing, if you're working with different companies that are in the same industry or different. It's knowing, okay, when I talk about company A, these are the choices, these are
That's the
the
tone.
words, the tone that fits this one. In company B, they're a little more playful. I can use a little bit of humor in this. So you could be talking about the same thing, but find 10 different ways to say it. And
Right.
especially as you said, content marketing is not a one-time thing.
Right.
When you're working with a client, you're working with them for hopefully for several years to come. And so you have to know how to regurgitate the same idea, but say it in
A
in a
fresh way.
in a fresh way every time. I used to always laugh because when I was working on a lot of real estate brochures, the favorite phrases were always verdant landscape and lush greenery.
Yeah.
So you're like, but I've already said that in 5 brochures. I need to find a different way to say it. But those are my favorite: verdant landscape, lush green. So finding, and because I worked on a lot of them throughout my career, I had to find different ways to say the same thing.
Right.
And that's still true to this day for content marketing, because
Yeah.
that allows you the flexibility to work with different brands, the flexibility to work for a long time with one particular brand, is
Mhm.
knowing how to say their message in different ways.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. A lot of people might know the company Geico. It's an insurance company. And
Yes.
since I can remember, it's been 15 minutes can save you 15% on car insurance. And
Yeah.
that's because that is the message that gets them the lowest quality lead they can turn it. They
Yeah.
have life insurance, they have business insurance, they have travelers insurance, they have home, and they have all these other insurances.
Yeah.
But if you have a car, you got to pay for your car, and you probably have enough money that you might have other things that we can insure as well. So for them, that's worked. But they've said it with clowns, they've said it with dogs, they've said it with a plane pulling a flag behind it. They've said it 1,000 different ways, but the message is still the same. And so I think
Yeah.
it's even a friend of mine. He's actually also very successful. He's got like an 8-figure business and a team of 15 people. And he always said that he felt that Dr. Seuss's Green Eggs and Ham was one of the best sales books, training books ever. Cause it's, hey, do you want to eat green eggs and ham? No. Would you eat them with a goat? Would you eat them in a boat? Would you eat them with a mouse? Would you eat them in a house? Would you eat them here? Would you eat them there? Like, it's the whole repackaging of the same sort of thing.
Yeah.
And I think that's important. Can you talk about monetizing content marketing? When talking to clients, you talk about hopefully working with them for a long time. For a lot of people, a lot of companies, they want to see an ROI. What are some of the pillars of what am I trying to say? What are some of the pillars, or what do you feel are best practices for validating content marketing services to a client in terms of ROI and in any way, shape, and form?
Content marketing, in terms of monetizing, is, I guess it is a little hard to explain, simply because it's not as, you don't get as direct result as you would
Right.
posting an ad, and then people 50% off burgers this week. And
Right.
then you can see how many people are going to flood in. But content marketing, that's why it's important to do like keywords and knowing the right way to ask questions, the right way to say things. It's because what it can do is get people to see you, get
Mhm.
people to come and want to learn more about you,
Right.
about your company. So the ROI may not be as obvious initially, but it can help you build leads. It can help you, because often, even for us, or even for me, like now when I ask, so how did you find me? I always ask people that, like people who contact me, or people who reach out to me, or even with the company, how did you find out about us? Oh, I was searching for this on the web, and your name came, or this company came up. Having presence, and having a strong presence in the web, in the industry, and in having a good strong presence in Google search numbers, that I think is one of the important things. That's how you see the ROI, is how many leads did you get, how many of these leads are good leads, how many people found you, and then those are what you translate, and that's how you see your ROI. At least that's how I see. Whether it's a direct result, whether you're talking about specific product features or just general things about the company. And also, for me, what's important is that you need to mine a particular business or a particular company, so that you're not talking about the same, like what you said about Geico, like you're not talking about the same thing in the same way over and over again. You have to find different ways, because you want everyone who searches even the most obscure obscure thing about that company that they're searching for, whatever the vaguest Google
Right.
questions that they're asking,
Right.
they'll lead to that company. It's important to know a lot about that company, and to find out the different things you can talk about. Like with insurance, are we just talking about the cost, the
Right.
savings, the coverage? No, you can also talk about the emotional aspect of being insured. You
Right.
can also talk about the security, the emotional security of being insured, a mothers worrying about their children about not being insured.
Right.
So these are different things
Mm,
that may not occur to you because you're so focused on the values and
yeah.
universal selling proposition and the brand messaging, etc. But there are other aspects to these things. So what could the idea is, what could they possibly search for that will lead them to me?
Yeah, I guess you have to work with clients and sometimes maybe even educate clients of the process of marketing, where you're basically there's an unknown universe of potential clients. We don't know
Yeah,
how big it is because it's constantly changing. If I asked you how many people are in market to buy a car today, we don't really know. There's keyword
no,
searches and foot traffic, but there's an unknown universe that's constantly in flux.
yeah,
And then there's the known universe. We get this many keyword searches, this is much
yeah,
foot traffic. So there's an unknown, a known universe. Then there's an engaged group out of that known universe.
yeah,
And out of that engaged group, you have people that have raised their hand that they're maybe interested. So there may be a marketing qualified lead, but then you have to have a sales qualified lead.
yeah.
And now you have an actual prospect for the sales team to work with. And that whole hierarchy is there's content at every step of that way. And you have to keep, there's people buy when they're ready to buy, not necessarily when you're ready to sell. Now you can help them
Exactly.
become ready to buy by doing specials and offers and deals, but you still have to stay in front. Realtors used to have, now everybody wants to build a following and all this sort of stuff. This, from what I understand, originally came from the real estate industry, where realtors would pick neighborhoods that they would farm. I'm doing air quotes here. They would farm a neighborhood. They would go door to door and meet everybody and give their
Mhm.
business card. They would host a barbecue in the park in the middle
Yeah,
of the subdivision. They would get to know everybody. They would show up for all the events if they were invited. Because what they wanted to do is they wanted everyone to know them and build their network, so they would become the go-to person if you were going to buy or sell your home. And
yes,
occasionally they would do workshops and stuff for people that were maybe considering it but hadn't done it yet. And so this idea of it was like a farming thing. I would nurture this land, I would nurture this community, and over time people would raise their hands and it would bear fruit. And so I think
yes,
that's a really important thing for people to understand, that content marketing needs to be built on top of a sales process. If you're just doing content marketing and you're waiting for people to come to your house and throw money at you, that's a tough way to go. It's better if you have a sales process that works when you have someone who's interested and ready, and then you start building out the road into the blue ocean strategy they talk about, being where none of your competitors are.
yes,
So many people are focused on the Chet Holmes wrote a great book called The Ultimate Sales Machine, I think it was a book. And he talked about how most businesses are focused on the 3% that are ready to buy now, and they're neglecting the 97% that are going to buy sometime in the next 6 months or year. And that's, I think, a great place for content marketing to be. And even with your content marketing, if you observe your stats, you're really able to see what's hitting and what's not hitting organic.
yes,
And when you know what your greatest hits are organically, now you have a portfolio of things that you can test if you are going to do paid advertising, or just a portfolio of things that work better than the rest. So I think that's a really important thing for people to understand. Content marketing is incredibly powerful. Gary Vee once said, he said, everybody needs to be producing 10 times more content than they are now, but 80% of their focus needs to be on the ads that drive their business. And I think it just comes back to the whole unknown universe, known universe, engaged universe, marketing qualified leads, sales qualified leads, and then obviously clients. And you need to focus on who are the marketing qualified, which just means they've raised their hand. And then are they qualified?
yeah,
And then turn those into sales. And if you combine those together, and if you have a client that isn't aware of that, then you can provide the value. Go, look, if you don't have a proven sales process, what I could do with my content is I can help you figure out what messages people care about most.
and especially now where there's a lot of ways to get feedback,
Yeah.
direct feedback. Like before, you just don't know. You post an ad, yes, you get sales results, but you also don't know. And then you think about what did and didn't work. Like I remember there was a campaign. I'm not going to mention brands or people. They hired a celebrity endorser, thinking she had endorsed a lot of products successfully. She was in demand as an endorser. So they hired her, but they hired her when they were rebranding the product. And they were surprised that it didn't work as well as they thought. They were expecting sales through the roof, but it didn't work. So there was a lot of question of why didn't she work? She has successfully launched products in this industry. It wasn't something that was foreign. They weren't asking like a female celebrity to endorse motor oil. It wasn't something, it was something that was within her wheelhouse, and it didn't work. So there was a lot of conversation about that. And one of the things that they realized perhaps was that maybe her value is launching a product and not in endorsing something that's already in the market.
Ah,
That was one of the theories. So things like that, so that one didn't have a direct feedback. So they had to study and figure out what happened
right.
to that. Because but now there's a lot of ways, because you can learn even from the negative comments
Oh yeah,
now.
for sure.
Yeah,
For sure.
You just have to sift through and remove all the haters and but sift through and know what they didn't like about it, what was missing from what you were doing. So it's important to get that feedback.
Yeah.
Even a social media post, yes, people are going to say something. Yes, people are, because like even for us, like when we publish just promotional material about our books, for example, the books that we publish at Bookshop PA, we do get we get these feedback, and then you're like, oh, so this is the information that they want about this book. Like we published not wrote, but we published a book about the book's called The Legend of Tessie Agana. Tessie Agana is a child actress from the 50s, a Filipino child actress from the 50s, and her daughter wrote a book about her. So we launched it early this year, and so we realized, like a lot of the people were asking things about, is she still alive? Where is she now? Oh, she was my favorite actor.
Right.
So we got a lot of feedback about that, and so then we learned, okay, this is what they want to know.
No.
Yeah. So then we started using that, the idea. And so I said, it might not be, we answered every single person. Yes, even if you're saying the same thing, yes, she's still alive, she's living in the US, so things like that. So this is what everybody wanted to know about her. So you focus on that and you use that as one of your key messages.
To build
right?
engagement.
To build engagement, because this is what they want to know, and this is what's going to make them want to know her story. You help them find a way. And she had an older fan base, of course. So they may not be the most technical. So helping them along and holding their hand and how to make that purchase, knowing how much help they need into getting a copy of the book, making sure like the book is available online, but there's a physical way for them to get it. So thanks to the information and the profiles of the people that were responding to these simple, where you just announced this book is available and these are the answers. So getting through that and reading all the comments and finding it really does give you information on how best to sell your product. And
No,
there's
100%.
and so people are lucky now because it's you get the direct feedback. But you don't have to do research. You don't have to do focus groups anymore.
You're not playing telephone with 7 agents between the front line and the head office.
Yeah. You don't have to sit through hours and hours of like focus group discussions, etc. Because your focus groups are all the people following your page, or all the people you try to reach with your boosting campaigns and in your Facebook ad campaigns and digital ad campaigns. So that's really could be frustrating when you read the comments, but it's also very helpful.
Yeah. There's a guy,
one of the
Matt Frazier. He's a 5-time CrossFit world champ, super fit guy. He talked about how he used to hate the negative comments. It used to really bother him. And then he said one day he'd had a coaching session with his coach and he was going through the comments and he realized all these haters are giving me free coaching. And his mindset around it totally changed. He was like, hey, I could have paid this guy all this money, but you're just going to tell me what I need to improve. And he just needed to remove his ego and understand these people are telling him what he needs to fix. Because if he can solve what they're complaining about, and there's not every troll has a valid
of course.
But in there is it's constructive. It may not be delivered as constructive criticism, but if you can, but there might be a diamond in that. And if you fix that, you'll shut them all up and you'll increase your sales and you'll increase everything else around it too. So to not be afraid and to understand that it's an iterative process.
Yeah.
I think is the best thing.
And one of the things also that struck us, so this book about Tessie Agana, the Film Development Council of the Philippines actually had a screening of one of her films recently. A couple of myself and one of our marketing managers, we said, let's go see the screening. One, I want to watch this movie, and two, I think it's good, especially she's much younger. I at least saw those movies when they were being shown on television back in the day, but not when it was not when it first shown. But when it was there used to be like on TV at the I think after lunch they
Okay.
would show old Filipino films, classic films. So
Mm.
I brought her, and so we were sitting next to these two men. It was dark. It was dark, so we didn't see how old they were. I was a little late. We could hear them, and they were saying the exact same things live that people were commenting in our Facebook posts. They were
Mm.
talking, and there's like, is she still alive? I wonder where she is now. Oh, she used to be.
Mm.
She used to do this. So we were saying, see, it really is what people want to know about
Yeah.
her. And we were laughing. We're like, it's like we're listening to the comment section of our posts
Yeah.
in real time. And I would say, so what other movies? The other guy wasn't as familiar. So what other movies did she do? And the other guy would answer, oh, she started this.
This guy's
So
giving us our content strategies. Yeah.
yeah. So I was like, okay, so it really is what they want to know, and it's really, and there are really people in that generation who don't know you that we would expect everyone to know. So it was funny to us, but funny in that we thought we really are asking the same questions. So it was a validation of the
Yes.
information that we were sharing. At the
Right.
same time, it was also, like you said, this is going to be our content strategy. We're going to just stick to this, and we're going to
Yeah.
keep talking
Yeah.
about that because this works and this is what they want to know.
Yeah.
And now it's rare to have that opportunity of just sitting in the dark room and hearing other people, because there's that anonymity. They didn't know who we were, and
Right.
so, but we were laughing. So we were caught between watching the movie and listening to it. And then so that was one we said, like I said, validating to know
Yeah.
that
And
we're
powerful.
yeah.
It shows the power of technology in today's day and age. 100%.
Yes.
Manette, this has been such an insightful and I think important interview. People may want to listen to it more than once to make sure they got all the nuggets out of it. Is there anything I haven't asked you that I should have asked you?
I don't know. I don't know. I guess what? I don't think so. I'm glad you said it was valuable. I'm just glad. I was worried I wouldn't say anything here that could help. But I guess one of the things that we get asked a lot, not for content marketing, but for the other side of the company, which is Bookshelf, which is the publishing. And I think which is also actually part of content marketing. It's just a different
Yes.
way of selling yourself. That's one of the things that we said is one of the things that we've been talking a lot about recently, is how you can actually use books as a way, as not just as a content marketing tool, but also establishing thought leadership.
Yeah.
Yeah. So books are a good way, and that there are still people reading books.
Oh yeah.
So there's value in that. So that's, I think, is one of the messages that we also hear at Ambidexter and at Bookshelf, being just related companies, want to share, is you may want to explore. You may not think about it, you may not have thought about it, but books, writing a book, being featured in a book, and things like that might be is a great way.
It's a really powerful way to get your name out there, because
Yeah.
somebody buys your book, it establishes you as an authority on the subject, and then they drank your Kool-Aid essentially. So when they do actually contact you, and there's value in the physical book versus just a PDF digital download. Tons of people download something, they intend to read it, and it disappears, and it never surfaces again. And there's not a ton of value in that. But that physical presence, it's on their shelf. They see it when they go up and down the stairs or whatever. There's real value in that. It is it's an underestimated and incredibly powerful tool to market yourself, 100%.
Yeah.
So Monette, if people want to learn more, if they want to continue the discussion, what are some of the best ways for them to reach out and get in touch?
They can follow us. Well, for Ambidexter, we're on LinkedIn. We will be on Facebook and soon, but we're revamping that. They can also follow Bookshelf. Bookshelf PH is Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. So they can reach us through that as well. And our website is up, bookshelf.com.ph. And if they want to send an email, they can just send an email to hello@ambidexter.media for any content marketing requirements. Yeah,
so if you want to send an email, that's
hello@ambidexter.media.
And that's AMBIDEXTR.
Again, XTR, yes.
Yeah, AMBIDEXTR. AMBIDEXTR.media. hello@ambidexter.media, or do a search for that, or Bookshelf PH, and you should find them online.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. It's been an honor and a pleasure to have you here. Thank you for coming and sharing with my audience and I, knowing you've got your own clients, your own direct reports, your own following to tend to. Thank you so much for coming and sharing your insights with us. You are valued and appreciated.
Thank you also for inviting me.